Hey everybody, it's John Kraska with EveryLibrary, the EveryLibrary Institute. It is Constitution Day 2025. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about the Constitution. In fact, I was on a podcast not too long ago where somebody asked me, what are you reading? And I was a little bit snotty, and I said, the Constitution. And it was true, because the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the 10th Amendment drive so many things about libraries. And we spend, of course, a lot of time talking about the free expression side of things with the First Amendment. We are talking more and more about that civil rights, human rights component in that equal protection kind of way. Unreasonable search and seizure around privacy and confidentiality of patron records, but fundamentally 10th Amendment, how do the states want to organize themselves? And we have everything from states like Connecticut and Colorado that passed great right to read laws this year. The states that are a little bit more difficult, like your Floridas and your Texases and such. Those conversations are part of the American experience and part of the federalist approach, this new federalism that we're finding our way into, but part of the American experience. But the American experience is full of mythology. And one of the things I wanted to do today on Constitution Day is talk about some of the mythologies of the American, well, is it American exceptionalism? Is it American structure? Is it the American ideal? And I want to bring in a scholar and a new colleague of mine, Dr. Casey Burgat, to have that conversation. Casey, thank you for being part of this today.
Absolutely, anything for the libraries.
No doubt, no doubt. Let me tell people why by reading your official biography. You know,
Okay.
Dr. Casey Burgat is the director of legislative affairs of the Legislative Affairs program at the Graduate School of Political Management at the George Washington University, where he also hosts its Mastering the Room podcast. Dr. Burgat was a senior governance fellow at the R Street Institute, where his research focused on issues of congressional capacity and reform. In that role, he wrote regularly for both scholarly and journalistic publications, including CNN, The Washington Post, and Politico. Previously, he worked at the Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress, which is why you have us in your heart, I know, where he served in the executive branch operations in the congressional and judiciary sections. There, he was responsible for responding to congressional requests about federal rules making, issues of congressional reform, the president's role in federal budgeting, federal advisory committees, and congressional staffing. Casey,
That is enough, jeepers.
No, here's the thing. I want to talk about your bona fides because, or your bona fides, if I can be, really highfalutin
About it. Yep.
Yeah, because you are at an interesting professional place of intersectionality between what libraries are supposed to be up to, what the government's supposed to be up to, and how things actually work. It's why I was so interested in having a conversation with you about your book, We Hold These Truths. The subtitle, How to Spot the Myths That Are Holding America Back. You dive into a lot of things in here about those myths, what they reveal about civic literacy, how to counter them, where reform can really sit. I mean, why did you want to write this book at this moment in American time?
Well, if I'm being honest, it was before this moment in time, but every election, every year, every semester with my students, it just became more and more apparent that we're having the same fights over and over and over, and we're not even really talking about issues that much, right? Like we think of presidential campaigns especially, but all of our campaigns about like what's the best vision for our communities, our constituents, America, the world, and then it's may the best ideas win. But less and less is it about those big idealistic type platforms and more about the same fights that my parents were having, my grandparents were having. Like there's a reason why we still have the same exact arguments on the issues and not going back all the way to our founding. And so as you read, I have a couple different backgrounds in this, from library to working on the Hill to now within the classroom think tank world. And everywhere I went, there was just this fundamental disconnect about what we think government is supposed to be, how it's supposed to operate, and then what we see every single day with how things are operating. And I get why people are frustrated. I absolutely understand it. But I think too much of this is it is a problem over there. It is something that will exist there. They don't represent me anyway. It's just a big gap between people's recognition of how powerful they could be to get what we want, and how their distrust leads to inaction, which just perpetuates a lot of the problems that we have.
The Democratic Republic, as it were, is fraught with peril because it is cyclical like that. We see this in library boards and school boards, too, at the most local level of government. We're not even talking about mayors. I'm not even talking about county commissions or state legislators. the how do we want to govern ourselves? Who do we want to be? Conversation keeps getting disrupted. You say in the book. I'm going to hold it up again. Our
beautiful.
our goal with this book is to help you extricate yourself from a problem that you didn't know you were part of, America. The book features contributions from members of Congress, academics, journalists. I mean, how did you decide what myths to tackle?
This was actually the easy part, right? Like in a book of that is kind of my career's life work so far of like, where do you draw the line of what to talk about and what not? And the easy part was like, I just had this running list based on just simple conversations that I was having with my family and friends when I did media outlets, my students more often than not, of just like the same things. Like these are the constant conversations. And again, we're not talking about policy or what evidence supports what type of platform to take. We're talking about things that we just know the answers to.
Right.
And in a world of unintended consequences and government, especially at the federal level, it's hard to have all of the information and have all of the answers. But these things we know the answers to. So at least we should be able to move on from this, because a lot of these myths are still being used purposefully to keep us divided, keep us angry, keep us upset, because they know if you're upset, it's more likely that you're going to be voters. It's just a dangerous cycle to keep continuing.
So in the myths list here, you've got I vote the issues, not the party. You've got members of Congress don't do anything. You've got lobbyists are evil. Mm-hmm. You have one that you wrote yourself on term limits will fix our broken Congress. I mean, these are cocktail party conversations. Yep. These are Thanksgiving dinner conversations, especially the one with your uncle, where you're like, yep. Oh, geez, uncle, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. The Constitution is opaque to a lot of Americans. And the structures of government, though, determine how the quality of our lives.
Absolutely. I mean, and I always focus on, I'm in DC, I'm a half mile from the Capitol right now. And I am a huge hypocrite in saying this because I do federal politics, but all politics, the more local you get, the more impact you can have. And so that's why libraries are so important. That's why city councils are so important. School boards, all of that stuff. But the Constitution, our structure of system forgets, like we are taught from when we're 7 years old, like we have a genius system of checks and balances. Mm-hmm. That's true, but two things can be true at the same time. And while as ingenious as that setup is and how enduring it was in a democracy, in a world where democracies have fallen over and over again, like they didn't solve all of our problems for us, nor did they pretend that they had all the answers in 1787 when they're doing this type of stuff. And so we need to recognize the limitations of that system, not lean on it as a crutch, but recognize that our position, our requirements, our civic duties necessitate us not only understanding it, but taking part in it. And if we have problems with it, they left us ways to fix it. They told us to. They said, walk this path for us because we're walking in darkness right now. Mm-hmm. And so there's a big burden on all of us. The trade-offs that we have of if you like the freedoms, if you like the participation, if you like to vote, that requires you to be an active, engaged citizen, which hopefully this book is a step in that right direction of knowing what's left from right.
You know, the 1776 was a reboot of government in a certain respect.
Bingo.
Yeah, but so was 1787 a reboot.
Bingo.
Yeah, I mean, the Articles of Confederation only went so far. I mean, you could even look at some of the Jeffersonian reforms around the Northwest Ordinances is like a refining, if not a 2.0 on the 1787 experience, you know? And we're still living within those structures of government. You're talking about myths here around the Supreme Court, around bipartisanship, about money in politics. What is the most damaging myth, if I can grab one out of here? Or what do you see as like the witch's brew that is the most damaging to civic trust today?
Ooh, okay. These are biggies. The one that's been sticking with me for too long, just given the nature of our moment right now, is that we can't even agree on what facts are anymore, or where to turn to for information, or can you trust your government to tell you the truth? Like these are fundamental questions. And so that leads me to answer the most dangerous myth right now. That's something that has proven to bring democracies down in our past is I vote the issues, not the party. That you hear people say that, saying, I don't care. I don't vote left. I don't vote right. You give me good ideas. I'm going to go with it no matter what their party labels are.
Mm-hmm.
They're lying. People are lying. It's been proven in not only surveys, but voting histories that we do the opposite. We don't receive information and then update our beliefs. We use our beliefs to update the information, not only in what we seek. So like in a world where we can curate literally what information we receive on our phones and our TV channels, it's so fragmented, we can find what we want. But even then, when we're presented with objective facts, we will rework them in our brain unconsciously, subconsciously, to fit the narrative that we came to the table with in the first place. And that is dangerous because you're not only not updating your beliefs, the more engaged you are, the less likely you are to update your beliefs, the less likely you are to receive new information, the less likely you are to compromise. And so there's this catch-22 that we beg for people to get involved. But we've proven over and over again that the more you get involved, the less likely you are to hear anything else besides what you already thought. That is a dangerous spot to be.
That is a dangerous spot to be, especially for guys like us. I mean, you teach on the topic. You're pretty heavily immersed. I run a political action committee for libraries. I'd like to think my nonpartisan statement on our website is true. I'd like to think that our nonpartisan pro-library perspective on tax policy, on the common good, on the rights of readers is, and yet you're telling me something that I know to be true too. Because when I saw President Trump's executive order on January 20th about anti-censorship or about freedom of speech, the grinding of my gears, you know. And is it better for me as an American to take that at face value? It might very well be.
Yeah, I mean, this requires a lot of us, right? So this is what's very hard in politics. That's never ending. It is a constant deluge of information, and I get why people say I can't follow it all anyway. So why would I try to even pretend to? So that's dangerous too. That's a gap too. But even if you're trying to do it, just think about where you're getting your stuff. And then even more simplistic to that, and I say this as a husband of a therapist wife, of like literally what is your first instinct when you literally hear a name or an issue said? Like if you hear Trump, you're going to have an immediate feeling. You're either going to find a reason to not believe it, or if you love the guy, you're going to be like, that's my homeboy. Let me find a reason why I love it.
Absolutely. Or, let's go, Brandon. Come on.
Exactly.
One of the stories I tell to librarians about about political conversations about libraries is that it's, of course, how do we tax ourselves? How do we organize ourselves? It's based on your own values system and your identity. And that's what you're saying here. Is that how do you bump out of your own identity, to refit those facts? How is our value system not just us as heroes and not just them as villains? And we talk a lot about, okay, how do you communicate your values system as an American institution, as a constitutional institution, even though public libraries aren't in the Constitution itself? How do you communicate it is, with your annual report, with your plans of services, and those are a lot like the book that the candidate writes. And as well as me, if you're watching that debate and that person that you're interested in with their book, you're holding it to your heart, and the other person starts talking and they're full of it, and you throw that book at the TV because they've violated your belief system, they violated your identity.
Bingo. I mean, you nailed it in the end, that we are driven by identity politics right now. This is not on accident, right? Like this is a known way of campaigns and parties to, again, motivate you enough to get off your couch and vote. The hardest thing for them to do, to make you care. And they've realized, especially in the last couple of decades, that they can not only make you care, they can make you afraid, and they can give you someone to blame for it. And again, this is antithetical to the I have the best vision. It's more they have the worst one, and I'm the lesser of the two evils. And that's just a dangerous spot to be in, not only how we think about our politics if we participate at all, but how we think about our fellow person. And so you brought up the us versus them. We're the good guys, they're the villains. And we see this reflected explicitly, including all the way up to the commander-in-chief of the other side is the enemy, scum. We saw authoritarian, like that, just these huge, dangerous labels that we bandy about. And then we assume those labels on anyone that we think is in that camp, right? Without ever having the interpersonal conversation that we know politics requires. And even more fundamentally, we know our communities require, that you are of your fellow man. You all have the same hopes. You have the same dreams. You have differing opinions about how to get there, but you're not even having the conversations about where you differ anymore.
So you mentioned in we hold these truths, folks, that I vote the issues, not the party section is the one that you only got a few minutes hanging out with it. I want to come back to two other ones if I could. The founders in their infinite wisdom. This mythology that they got it all right back in 1787. And I want to talk to you about your section in particular about term limits.
Deal.
So, did they get it right?
Mostly, but not everything. I mean, you can think about, I urge people, you mentioned you were reading the Constitution the other day. I urge people to do it. It will take you 17 minutes, and you'd be surprised not only how short it is, given how enduring it is, but also like, where are certain things that we assume to be in there? And then a lot of stuff that we assume to be true or have huge impact on how our politics runs today is super opaque, and it's unbelievably vague, meaning that there's got to be human actor interpretations of this stuff that we've debated. And so, yes, did they get it right for their time? Yes, especially because, as you mentioned, this wasn't our first swing at this. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they had to get the second one correct. They had to make it last, knowing that they can't fail again like the articles did. Everyone was already distrusting. They were about ready to secede back into their own individual states' governments. And so they knew they had to get this right. So what passed was passable. It wasn't perfect, and they never pretended it to be, which is why they gave us an avenue to update this thing, not only in how they carry out the day-to-day business of the government, but if you want to change the document they passed anyway, the fundamental Constitution, they gave you an amendment process to do it, which we've only used 27 times so far, and twice those were on alcohol.
Right. The other thing, just a really quick rabbit hole here, letters of marque and reprisal. Like, whatever happened to those,
Yeah, I don't know. We can bring them back. It's still right there. They're in the toolbox.
Yeah. Okay, so term limits. Because I sometimes am relieved when the candidate that I don't like, the politician, even the elected official, if I have some respect for him or her, disappears from the stage, because the term limits have saved us.
Yeah. I get it. This is the one where I was more than willing to take on, given that 1 out of 100 people has my belief, right? Like, I know I'm going against the masses here, because term limits automatically kicking out the people that they see as ineffective just makes sense logically, right? It's a simple equation. Congress sucks. That means the members sucks. That means to change Congress, you got to change the members. I get it. But we have proven over and over again that replacing these folks, especially in a polarized era, in a hyper-polarized era, is going to do so much more damage. It's even on the things you think it will fix. It will not help polarization. It will not help deference to lobbyists or reliance on money or the president. It will not create a more diverse legislature. There is just other more fundamental underlying issues. And so for term limits, I get your instinct, but let's solve the problem you're trying to solve. And we can do that in more direct ways. And for the people thinking about, well, man, we got a very old legislature. We have members of Congress freezing at the camera, if not outright dying in office. Get it? Those are age limits, which is a very, very different thing than term limits. And that's a debate we can have too.
We didn't have term limits for the president until reforms after FDR. So, yeah. Okay. Let me ask you the next question, which is, okay, where do we go from here, Casey? If dismantling the myths is the first step for folks, what comes next? How do we move from this kind of cynicism, and I'm a little cynical here and there, to constructive engagement?
Yeah, so this is, again, where I frustrate people, but I like having specific conversations. When you say, where do we go from here? I'm going to ask you where you want to go, right? Because the answer to that depends on what you want to do. And within politics, like, there is the point of this book, if I can summarize it in my goal, is there's stop falling for silver bullet solutions. They are doing more harm than good. So when someone says, I got the ABCs to fix politics, that should be alarm bells in your head saying, you want something from me and you don't have the solution anyway. If it were to exist, if it were to be easy, just like my grandpa always said, someone would have already done it by now. And so depending on where you want to go, I got different answers about what you want to do. But in terms of being less cynical, what I will say is get involved in person. Mm-hmm. It is the best way to not only recognize that the civil servants, the bureaucrats that we are so easy to just trash, you'd be like, man, you are kind of committed to your job in a way that I didn't know that this is what your day-to-day looked like. You are good at this. You care about this. And you can only know that if you are direct, face-to-face conversation with them. So the best advice I can give, especially locally, get involved.
So libraries are part of that. This is Constitution Day in libraries, kind of programming. You've got some personal experience of working in, one of the biggest library in the world. Libraries as front lines on civic education. getting involved is both a knowledge base, so an institution like a library, archives, even museums that help move people into at least some degree of engagement with accuracy of information. And I'm not trying to talk about mis and disinformation here. This is just like, okay, how do you get current? How do you get up to real speed? And then I look at libraries and the governance of libraries, whether it's an elected library board or an appointed library board. I look at school districts as well with the boards as like that laboratory of democracy that sometimes is said as the states. But really, we've got 9,850 public libraries where you could participate in how we've set up government.
Unbelievable. Yes, absolutely. And even just more simply, they're convening places in a world where people are increasingly siloed or a home or anonymous or electronic. Like de Tocqueville told us from the get-go, the strength was not in our diversity, though that was a strength, but the fact that people show up and got together. Like they were manufacturing what it means to be a citizen without ever thinking about it. It came naturally to us. And we have disappeared from that a bit, in that we think we're connected just because our phones are. And I think that libraries can serve such a trusted, convening source for people. Plus, if you just look at what they put on almost across the board, you'd be like, oh my God, there's a lot going on at my library. Mm-hmm. And yeah, does it take a Tuesday out of your week? It does. But again, it's not free. And if you pretend like you just can be current or can become involved without actually doing the work, then you're just fooling yourself.
Yeah, the engagement around how do we want to tax ourselves? How do we want to see the Constitution interpreted or implemented? I mean, these are very practical things. You see situations around the country where a library board or a school board is being confronted by someone who says that a book should be removed because it is obscene. Yep. And that discussion about the contemporary community values that kick in. The idea that, okay, is this really obscene, or are you just uncomfortable by it, or made uncomfortable by it? Or are you using that language of obscenity to weaponize the First Amendment against another group? And those are played out every day right now around America in ways that some folks who, it doesn't have to be conflict, though. It could also be coming in and doing participatory budgeting. Okay, great. How do we want to tax ourselves? How do we want to spend it? And I do think that there's something very powerful about that laboratory of constitutional democracy.
Absolutely. And I think people would be very surprised how not only needed their voices are, but actually how impactful their voices are. Like when you have board meetings or you have school board meetings and you stand up to talk, like you are informing the decision makers. And there's this inverse relationship where we think most gets done in Congress to affect our everyday lives. It's actually more local, right? And and your impact can be so much more. Like if you call your member of Congress, which we all see all the time, I mean, some 18-year-old intern is answering that call. It's going to be logged on the list of hundreds that come in that day. But if you call your county commissioner, it's going to be one of 2, 3, and you know these people. You're able to see them. And so that direct access is a huge be-all, end-all in politics, but it requires people to not only understand that, but to take advantage of it too.
And we've been around now for over 13 years as the Political Action Committee for Libraries, and we spend most of our time at the zip code level. We work on a lot of different local campaigns. We work on opportunities as well as crises for libraries. Congress hasn't heard from us very much up until recently because the action is, like you're describing, in the localities in the states. So, Casey, We're coming around to the end of our time together. It was a very fast conversation. I really appreciate you for it. I want to ask folks if they want to be in touch with you. I know that you've got a Substack. Do you mind sharing about that?
I don't. So I have a civics-minded Substack that is kind of using. Oh, sorry. I have a civics-minded Substack that is using the topics of the day to break them down for people not only to understand, but to situate it in ourselves, so that we can kind of take away the volume and understand just the facts and why it matters, either historically or in present day. So you can find that at caseyburgat.com. Comes out once, maybe twice a week on something that you're probably hearing about, but should probably know a little bit more, especially if you're going to get into arguments about it.
Oh, that's the whole point. If we can just go sit down and have a cocktail with each other and have a good argument that leads to something, I think that's the big one. Okay, so the myths that are busted, the truths that need to be remembered. What's your closing thought here?
again, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I'll say it tonight when I have class with my students, that if you complain, your activity, your involvement better at least match the volume of your complaint. If you ain't showing up, then leave your complaints at the door. We have a beautiful, unrelenting democracy, but it takes people to actually be involved. So if you're pissed at it, then your actions better reflect that you're pissed and you're doing something about it.
Decisions are made by the people who show up. I love that.
Amen.
Yeah, Dr. Casey Burgat, thank you for being part of EveryLibrary Live today and having this Constitution Day 2025 conversation. On EveryLibrary Live, we always end up by waving at the audience. Thank you for being here. I put up the title card again, and I see you in the green room.